Ever since I first held a Game Boy in my hands... Sorry, I've read that wrong. Ever since I first held a Game Boy in my hands, I've been chasing that perfect portable gaming experience. I think even then I wanted more than the Game Boy could offer. I wanted a Super Nintendo in my pocket. That's not a euphemism, by the way. So getting into the whole retro handheld gaming thing has been something of a dream come true, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than plastic surgery. I was very excited when I got my Cube XX, and even more excited when the Odin2 Portal arrived. By the way, I'm convinced that they call it the Odin because when you try and take out the SD card, it flies up into your face and blinds you in one eye. But there's always been something missing with these devices, something that could comfortably play DS, 3DS and Wii games in the right form factor. That was until last year when AYN released a dual-screen flip device and recently followed it up with the Flip DS and Pocket DS. But AYN devices aren't exactly pocket-friendly in size or in cost. I never thought I'd be able to afford one, and just when I thought I'd seen it all, along comes AYN, I'm going to call it, with their Thor lineup, and suddenly I'm that kid again, staring at a wall of gaming possibilities and trying to figure out which one will finally scratch that itch I've been carrying for decades. And if you do suffer from itchy decades, there'll be a helpline number and some topical cream after the show. So here we are, about to dive deep into the decision that's been keeping me awake at night. Which AYN Thor should I actually buy with my own hard-earned money? Join me as we navigate this maze of specifications, price points, and the eternal question of whether more RAM makes you the GOAT. The AYN Thor has officially landed, and unlike most reviewers who seem to get shiny review units delivered to their doorstep, I'm actually here staring at the same pre-order pages that you are. Calculator in one hand, credit card statement in one hand, spec sheet in one... It's too many hands, isn't it? Anyway, I'm trying to figure out which version isn't going to require me to survive on instant noodles for the foreseeable future. Based on announced dimensions and weight, the Thor should be a comfortable handheld unit. The real test, of course, is going to be those long sessions and the button feel once the units are in people's hands. But on paper, it's looking promising. It features a 6-inch 1080p AMOLED main display running at 128Hz with a 3.92-inch secondary AMOLED panel at 60Hz. This setup is designed to mirror DS, 3DS dual-screen gameplay accurately, though actual panel brightness and colour performance is only going to be confirmed when the hands-on units are available. One thing that we don't know is how the device is going to act with the two panels with different refresh rates. Only time will tell, but on similar devices, the faster panel gets limited to the slower panel's refresh rate, so it may be the same here. The Thor comes in 4 flavours, each more tempting than the last. The Thor Lite is the entry-level model that comes with a Snapdragon 865, 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. Now, the 865 is a perfectly respectable chip. It was a flagship model back in 2020, which in smartphone years makes it roughly equivalent to a fine vintage wine. For DS and 3DS emulation, this thing should handle everything that you throw at it, with the casual confidence of somebody who's never even heard of frame drops. The dual screens make it perfect for the Nintendo's dual screen systems, and honestly, if your gaming ambitions stop at Pokemon Black and White, then this might be all you need. But the moment that you start eyeing up those Wii U games, that Snapdragon 865 begins to look like it's being asked to perform surgery with a butter knife. It's technically possible, but the performance can vary depending on the game's demands, and more graphically intensive games may experience frame rate drops and occasional stuttering. It's the handheld equivalent of buying a sports car with a family saloon engine. It looks the part, but the performance might leave you questioning your life choices. Having said that, this is the configuration of the popular Retroid Pocket 5 and Flip 2. These are very capable devices, so even the Lite version here is no slouch. One thing to remember with all of these, there'll be this little extra bit of processing power needed to handle the second screen. It should be minimal in most cases, but it could result on some slowdown on the really high-end emulation. Moving up the ladder, we have the Thor Base, which swaps that 865 for a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, whilst keeping the same 8GB of RAM. The 8 Gen 2 is a popular powerhouse, the kind of chip that looks at Wii U emulation and asks, is that all you've got? This is where things start getting genuinely exciting for retro game enthusiasts. You're looking at smooth GameCube performance, respectable Wii emulation, and Wii U games that actually run at playable frame rates instead of resembling a slideshow narrated by somebody with a stutter. The base model sits at that sweet spot where you're getting a performance boost without completely emptying your bank account. And then we have the Thor Pro, and this is where I started getting genuinely excited. The same 8 Gen 2 processor, but now with 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. That's an extra 4GB of RAM, and it might not sound like much, but in the world of emulation, it's the difference between smooth sailing and hitting an iceberg made of memory allocation errors. The 256GB storage means that you are not playing Tetris with your gaming library every time you want to install something new, but they could have given us that 512GB like in the Portal 2 Pro. This is the model that looks at Switch emulation and says, hold my beer, a handheld that could potentially run Breath of the Wild at playable frame rates, which feels like the kind of technological wizardry that would have got you burnt at the stake just a few years ago. Officially, all Thor models are powered by a 6,000 mAh battery. Expected battery life will depend heavily on emulator load and screen usage. Lighter titles may allow for several hours, whilst more demanding Wii U or Switch emulations will drain it faster. Of course, we won't really know this until a reviewer gets hold of one and actually does the work. Finally, there's the Thor Max, the absolute king of the lineup. 16GB of RAM and a full terabyte of storage, because apparently AYN decided that subtlety was for other companies. This is the model for people who look at the Pro and think, but what if I want to run a small country whilst playing Pokemon? The Max is overkill in the most beautiful way possible, like bringing a tank to a water balloon fight. It's completely unnecessary, but undeniably impressive. All Thor models have USB-C charging and DisplayPort output, and they come with Bluetooth 5.2. The Lite models has Wi-Fi 6, the Base, Pro and Max step it up with Wi-Fi 7 for faster, more future-proof connections. In other words, even with the entry-level model, you're not going to be left waiting for downloads, and the higher-end models are ready to handle everything you can throw at them. The thing is, for pure emulation purposes, that 8 Gen 2 is going to be your bottleneck long before you run out of RAM. It's like having a Ferrari engine and a car with bicycle wheels. The limiting factor is not necessarily where you think it is. But these car analogies are getting tedious now. But if you're planning to dabble in WinLater for Windows emulation, or you're the type of person who likes to have 17 different things running simultaneously whilst streaming to Twitch and editing video in the background, then the Max starts to make more sense. Now, you might be wondering why I'm not considering AYN's recent offerings. Still available, and some with a similar price points. They've got the Flip DS, or is it the Flip One? I can never remember. And then the Pocket DS models on sale right now, both with these dual screen setups. The Pocket DS is still in its early bird offer stage. The Flip is essentially a modern take on the classic clamshell design, running a Windows machine that can even play some AAA games fairly well, whilst the Pocket DS goes for a more traditional Android operating system. Both are tempting, but the Flip DS is over $1,000 and the Pocket DS's early bird pricing is nearly as expensive as the Thor will be at full price. I love the idea of AYN, but something about those price points just don't sit well with me. Then there's the competition to consider. The Retroid Pocket 5 has been making waves with its impressive price to performance ratio for quite some time, and the Retroid Flip 2 offers its own take on the flip screen concept, just without the dual screen support. The Pocket 5 with its new screen attachment is a solid all-rounder, but it lacks the integrated design that makes the Flip devices so appealing. And the Flip 2, well, it doesn't look like it's compatible with their new dual screen accessory anyway. I should mention that I already own an Odin2 Portal Max, which will handle all of the heavy lifting for the more demanding emulation tasks I might want to throw at it. That can tackle PS3 games, at least in the limited amount of emulation that we've got at the moment. It can do demanding PC titles through Winlator and basically anything that I can throw at it. So for me, the Thor doesn't need to be the ultimate emulation powerhouse, but it might be for you. This is where the dual screen design is really important. Playing a DS game on a single screen is like trying to read a book where every other page has been randomly shoved into a different chapter. Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston, I'm looking at you. The Thor's dual screens means that DS and 3DS games work exactly as intended, without the compromises that plague other emulation handhelds. After hours of deliberation, spreadsheet comparisons, and the kind of deep research that would make a PhD student blush, I've settled on the Thor Pro with a 1TB SD card, and here's my reasoning. The Pro gives me that sweet spot for performance and price. The 12GB of RAM provides enough headroom for demanding emulation tasks without venturing into that overkill territory, and the 256GB of internal storage means that I'm not constantly juggling files. The 1TB SD card expansion gives me room to grow, plus having a massive game library at my fingertips means that I can indulge in that particular form of gaming paralysis where you spend more time choosing what to play than actually playing it. As for battery life, the Thor is pretty solid. It's talked about the 6,000 mAh battery pack, and I'd expect the Lite to comfortably last a full day of retro gaming, whilst the Base, Pro and Max might give you a solid 5 or 6 hours when pushing the Wii U or Switch emulation. Dual screens and fancy graphics are going to nibble at the battery a little bit, but you're not going to be hunting for a charger halfway through your marathon session. The Pro model strikes that perfect balance between capability and cost. It's powerful enough to handle everything that I want to throw at it today, but it's going to give me enough overhead for tomorrow's emulation advances. The base model would probably be adequate for what I need, but that extra RAM gives me peace of mind, and the larger storage means fewer compromises about which games will make the cut. The Max would be lovely, but it's solving problems that I don't have. And to be honest, I think it's solving problems that most people don't have either. The extra RAM and the storage would be nice, but they wouldn't meaningfully improve my gaming experience enough to justify the initial cost. It's more for people, I guess, who want to max out what the device can do, or who have got heavier emulation tasks. And to be honest, I don't think that's most of us. For anyone considering the Thor lineup, think about what you actually want to play. If you're interested in older systems right up to the DS, then the Lite is perfectly fine. For GameCube era, the base model will serve you well. And if you want to dabble in Wii U and Switch emulation, the Pro is probably your best bet. If you're the type of person who needs to run multiple virtual machines whilst playing games, streaming, and controlling a small space program situated in the Adriatic, then the Max is calling your name. The beauty of the Thor is that there's genuinely no wrong choice here, just different levels of future-proofing and different price points. AYN has managed to create a lineup where each model makes sense for a different use case, rather than the usual approach of making the base model deliberately crippled in some way to push people towards more expensive options. So there you have it, my deep dive into the AYN Thor decision matrix, complete with the kind of overthinking that would make Hamlet proud. The Pro model with the 1TB SD card represents my personal sweet spot, but your mileage may vary depending on your gaming preferences, budget, and tolerance for buyer's remorse. And I really hope this dip into the waters of mythological named gaming devices has been useful and perhaps cemented your decision on which version is right for you. What do you think? Are you tempted by the Thor lineup? Are you holding out for the next big thing in handheld gaming? Let me know in the comments below which model caught your eye. and why. And if you found this deep dive helpful, then please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more handheld gaming content, and some Thor content when I finally get it through the post. I'm very interested to see whether the Thor is going to be a broken hammer or hung like a Norse.